Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today right here at NDTV Profit. We're now having a conversation with Maruti Suzuki on a very landmark feat of the company that they're looking to start exporting the SUV Fronx to Japan. And to talk to us more about this particular feat, as well as how the export market is shaping up for Maruti Suzuki, as well as the passenger vehicle industry in India. We're now joined by Mr. Rahul Bharti, who's the current Executive Director as Corporate Affairs of Maruti Suzuki. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you so much for joining us today here. I want to start by first, congratulating on this particular landmark feat. Now, starting to export the Fronx into Japan, a market that you're well versed with as well. Previously, also you had sent across the Baleno. Just if you could just talk us through, the current feat of what this particular, landmark agreement means for you and going forward as well.
Thanks, Puneet. And as you rightly said, it is a landmark milestone. The reason being exports is strategic for us. It is strategic because the growth ambition, whether we talk about as a company or as a country for the manufacturing sector, the growth ambition cannot be met by the domestic market growth alone. We need exports also to supplement growth. And why not? I mean, India's time has come. We can capture a greater share of the world trade now. So we have already been exporting to about 100 countries of the world. About 4 years ago, we were averaging about 1 lakh car sales a year. And now, last year, we have increased it to about 288,000 units. And this year, we are targeting, even on that high base, something like 300,000 car exports. We want to take it to something like 750,000 to 8 lakh by the turn of the decade. And the Fronx has been a very strong model in terms of customer pull in India. Barely a year since launch, it has done about 1.8 lakh and about 30,000 plus unit of exports. Japan is a very demanding market in terms of quality, cost. And for us, exports to advanced markets like Japan and Europe is a fire test of global competitiveness in technology, cost, quality, design, finesse. So it's a landmark achievement. And it's made in Gujarat. It will be shipped to the Toyohashi port of Japan.
Right. Now, just wanted to take the conversation forward on exports. Like you rightly said, last year's exports around 2.88 lakh units. This year is targeting to 3 lakhs. How going forward, are you addressing, this export market share? Is it more so that, you guys are exporting SUVs, or is it that the hatchbacks are also going across the markets? And we'll talk about exports a bit more, but just to start off the conversation on the export market for Maruti Suzuki.
Sure. So interestingly, in our exports, both hatchbacks and SUVs are having a fair share. In fact, till recently, the Swift and the Desire were the highest selling models. Today, the highest selling model is the Fronx. If we go by the first 4 months of the financial year. So it's fairly diversified. It's also diversified in terms of regions. We are doing to Africa, South America, Mexico, Middle East, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Southeast Asia also. And we wanted to come back to Japan and Europe. So it's fairly diversified.
Just taking, like you rightly said, 100 plus countries for Maruti Suzuki that it exports its cars to. How do you see the idiosyncrasies of geographies? So, because we've seen other players who are currently exporting from the country. A couple of them are, global MNCs. They are exporting it to countries which are the emerging market, the Thailands of the world, the Bangkok, the Indonesias. How are you, firstly competing in those markets with them? And secondly, what kind of difference do you see in, for something Maruti does in Africa versus something that Maruti does in Europe? Because both are very different segments of exports. If you could just talk us through that, sir.
Yes, you're right. Every market has its own specific, customer preferences, and each market has a different regulatory environment also. So the product design, when we do at the global level, we try to aggregate demand from all over the world. So when we do the platform design and the powertrain design, the back end is fairly common. And then, of course, we have the top hat, but the features we give specific to each market. It is so interesting that the models which are high selling in India are also in high demand globally. The Baleno, the Swift, the Desire, they have done exceedingly, and now the Fronx, they have done exceedingly well for us in India and in other markets of the world. There are some other than product attributes also that help in exports. For example, customer engagement practices, how you handle customer complaints, the reach out efforts, the financing, the insurance, the handling of complaint systems. So ground level efforts in these customer engagement practices also help a lot.
Now, just one follow-up on that. You specifically, of course, mentioned on the ground effort of the company across factors. How are you competing with, because we see, you mentioned that over the next few years, by 2030, we already have the launch pipeline for most companies, which is very positive and strong, and exports is a big part of that. How are you competing with the fact that India could potentially become a manufacturing hub going forward, and essentially the export piece comes after that? So how are you competing with the likes of, some of the private listed players, some of the Korean guys who are here, and exporting to the emerging markets, so as to say, because you also have the local companies in those countries as well that you're competing with. What is the strategy for Maruti? And if you could also specify this, the different powertrains as well, because CNG is a big, push in India currently. We've seen a very strong performance in CNG in Q1 as well. Is it a similar, powertrain strategy outside as well for exports?
Right. See, the fundamental and the simplest answer is competitiveness on technology, performance, and cost. If you are competitive on that, irrespective of competition coming on whichever sector, you will win. And therefore, it is very positive for Maruti Suzuki that 40% of all exports from the country are Maruti Suzuki cars. Also, in the past few years, in terms of the growth, in the past 3 years, out of the entire growth that has happened in absolute numbers of cars, 70% of that has been contributed by Maruti Suzuki. Somewhere it is a statement on the technology, quality, and cost. And of course, design and finesse and everything that goes with it. So if that is competitive, chances are you'll be a winner everywhere. We would like to increase this further all the way till 2030, and we have a target of about 750 to 8 lakh cars a year. In terms of powertrain distribution, CNG, now India is probably the leader. Earlier, some European countries, Italy, etc., were had very positive influence of gaseous fuels like CNG or LPG. Now India is becoming probably the global capital of the world as far as natural gas vehicles are concerned. And even in terms of other technologies, we have a good presence. If we talk about powertrains like electric, the EV that we will be launching very soon will also be exported. In fact, export is a very big part of the strategy, and we'll be exporting to Europe and Japan the EV SUV that we will be launching soon.
My final question, Mr. Bharti, you did mention a little bit on the long-term outlook because by 2030 you are targeting to have exports of roughly about 8 lakh vehicles, somewhere in the range of maybe between 4 million vehicles, 40 lakh vehicles for Maruti itself. The industry will be around 60 to 70 lakhs. How does the picture change going forward? Because I also wanted to address the point that you made for EVs specifically. I think your target is around 6 to 7 or around 8 lakh EVs by then as well. Do you see that the EV proportion of exports will be much higher compared to the domestic market for you? And specifically, are you seeing any kind of, the SUV-fication of the export market as well? Because we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years, the domestic market has been very strong for exports. Do you see that similar trend play out over the next 5 to 6 years? Because your other two domestic listed peers are only focusing on that launches. How do you see, going forward as a long-term picture? I know you won't be able to talk numbers, but the ideology of exports going forward for Maruti, for EVs, and specifically on SUVs as well.
Sure. Your first question I'll try to address first, that within EVs, will the percentage of exports be more than what it is for the existing portfolio? The reason we have a good percentage of exports in EV is because we need volumes to make EV manufacturing viable in India. So even if EV adoption is at the moment slightly modest, we would of course make very strong efforts to increase customer confidence for EV adoption in India. But we will also de-risk the volume by exporting to maximum number of countries of the world, including to the advanced countries like Europe and Japan. So while it is difficult to predict numbers, but we need export numbers for EV, to get more economies of scale in EV manufacturing. And the best part will be the cost benefit of that will flow to the Indian consumer.